Hello, this is Jimmy T with Eye on Inyo. Today we're honored to have Sergeant Chris Connolly from Lone Pine. So we would like to follow up, give you a timeline of what happened with the Dorothy McQueen case. So Chris, what can you tell us?
Well, I could tell you briefly, kind of with Dorothy McQueen, the homicide case. Recently, as of record yesterday, we placed Steve Allen in custody related to this homicide. This kind of goes back to pretty much the early part of 2023. We had a call of a deceased female in a field, which was east of Independence. That call came in through a DWP worker that had saw something in the field. So we went out, responded, saw that there was a deceased female in the field, identified her as Dorothy McQueen. And that's kind of where the investigation started back on April 10th of 2023. And obviously now in 2024, in February, we finally made an arrest. So I know there's a lot of questions, as far as time that you might have for me, kind of how it ended up where we are today. That's kind of why I'm here to shed a little bit of light on the investigation as much as I can.
So you said she hadn't been there. She'd been there for 10 to 14 days?
Um, she wasn't. She had been there for a while, deceased for a while.
Okay.
We know that based on the presentation of Miss McQueen. So it wasn't it wasn't like it happened, right on the spot. It had been some time. So the investigation at that time, we were already kind of behind a little bit as far as the time of death. So
So what was your next event? What did you do once you found Miss McQueen and you figured she'd been murdered?
right. So obviously a forensic autopsy happens, and when I say forensic autopsy, there are times where we contract out with different counties that have a forensic medical examiner that is certified and all that. And in this case, Madera County is what we use. So Dorothy was taken to Madera County where the autopsy was conducted, and then pretty much you get a cause of death. And at that point, the cause of death was with a firearm.
Now, where did you go once you figured out the cause of death?
Well, you always go on any scene, kind of where her last whereabouts were. So without getting into too much detail, we've kind of narrowed everything down as evidence, social media accounts, who she was last seen, where she was, that kind of stuff that kind of give us an idea of where she was before we found her deceased.
What was the biggest marker that led to the arrest?
I don't want to go into too much detail, but the one thing, obviously, with the press release was DNA. DNA came back. So once the DNA came back, that solidified the evidence we already had. That's what absolutely came down. And the DNA process is a very slow one. We send those out as well. We don't have labs here, so the DNA lab is in Fresno with the Department of Justice through the state of California. And that lab services at least another 4 or 5 municipalities and counties. So the DNA lab that they have as far as cases is it's all kind of stacked up. And you kind of, I've reached out to DOJ and they were great with us as understanding of where our evidence was in the process, where the collection was. So there's stages. There's identifying human DNA, identifying the microscopic, and the latent evidence. They identify that. Then it goes to another process. It gets handed over to another lab. And in this case specifically, it was the DNA lab. And there's probably 4 DNA analysts that work in that lab. And it just took a little bit of time. So once the results were finally processed, there was a match with DNA that we were looking at. We got that information yesterday morning and made the arrest yesterday afternoon.
To back up just a moment, people don't understand how long it takes to get DNA evidence processed. And also, there's a list of the prioritization. So if it's in a hot case, if something happened right now, they'll try to process it that first, right?
Right. And you're looking at Fresno. And there's a lot of hot cases in Fresno compared to Inyo County. And that's not taking anything away from, our wants and our needs in certain cases. You're kind of left to that. We don't have our own lab here in Inyo County. We definitely don't have forensic DNA analysts that could get that information to us. There are other agencies we looked at that maybe have a speedier process, but you don't want to ship out all of your evidence to 14 different places. So DOJ is what we use, and that's what we stuck with.
So you made the arrest. How did that lead? What led up to the arrest?
The DNA evidence.
Yeah.
I could say it was
Right.
just DNA evidence. I won't go into too much
Yeah.
as far as what it was, but that was it. That's what we were waiting on. It came back and solidified the evidence we'd already gathered in the scene, and then we made the arrest.
In the timeline, what were the major difficulties you had to address?
Well, you're looking at 9 months, from a lot of things. The difficulties we have is Dorothy's mother, Dorothy's family, Dorothy's friends, not being able to tell loved ones and the family members, bring them any kind of information. I couldn't, tell Dorothy's mom, what we have going on other than just, trust the process. This where it's at. Until I made that phone call to Dorothy's mom, which is a good phone call and it's a bad phone call. The best worst phone call I've ever had to make in this line, to say that we've arrested somebody for the murder of your daughter. And it's one of those that you hold with you, not being able to give information even to the family members. So fortunately, in this case, with that evidence, I was able to make that phone call.
It's excellent. It's hard. You got the secret. You can't tell anybody.
Right, and it's for the best, and even secrets that we can't give out to the public. It's for the best, for the integrity of the case, to ultimately get a conviction and have justice prevail. And that goes into every case that we do, not just homicides. There's cases that people want to know information, and we can't give that information out. Just we want to do the right thing, and it's frustrating. Believe me, I understand that. It's extremely frustrating to not be able to share this information. I kind of keep it to yourselves, but there is a process, and we respect that process, and that's what we have to do.
Cool. Thank you very much.